In December 1944, near Bastogne, a Sherman tank lay half buried in frozen mud. German shells shattered the tree line, shaking snow from splintered pines. Inside the turret, one loader moved faster than the recoil itself. His arm swung backward, not forward, a reversed motion that broke every rule drilled into him. The 75mm gun fired twice in 22 seconds. Commanders blamed a faulty timer. It was not. Under fire, the cruise rate had doubled without new gear or redesign, only a change in motion. Field notes logged the line. Reload cycle cut by half under fire. Before that night, combat reloads averaged 9 seconds. The new rhythm dropped below 5. Each shell slid home through momentum instead of strength, guided by a flick of the wrist and the echo of recoil. The turret became a clock that no manual had written. By dawn, the ridge was silent. The tank's barrel steamed white against the snow, still aimed at the hill it had flattened hours earlier. No one spoke. The crew watched frost settle on spent brass, realizing speed had turned survival into fact. By dawn, one loader had changed the math. Through most of 1944, tank battles in Europe were measured in seconds. The Sherman, dependable yet slower than its German rivals, could not match the Panther's 6-second reload rhythm. Manuals set 9 seconds as fact, a cycle no man could shorten. Crews accepted it like armor thickness, unchangeable and precise. Inside a turret barely wide enough to move, time was a wall. The loader's space in an M4 measured just over 1 meter across. 75mm shells lined the walls in brass racks, each weighing nearly 7 kilograms. The loader lifted, braced, and swung forward between shocks of recoil that tossed him against the steel. Sweat and oil made the casing slick, gloves stuck to powder dust. The act became repetition: lift, seat, close, shout, up. No one imagined that motion could evolve. At Fort Knox, training reels showed a perfect drill: right hand pushing, left guiding, body pivoting in unison with the gun. Every movement fit doctrine, practiced until instinct. The Army called it manual precision. The phrase meant obedience, not efficiency. In North Africa and Italy, it had worked well enough. In the frozen forests of Belgium, where seconds cost lives, it no longer did. By winter 1944, snow filled the hedgerows and hydraulic lines stiffened under 45 degrees Celsius swings between day and night. Crews burned fuel to keep systems alive. Commanders believed speed could come only from new motors or lighter shells. Tests at ordnance depots failed to change results. Within the tanks already fighting, only muscle could compress time. Among them, one loader noticed the error hidden in routine. Each reload forced him to lean forward, twist, then retreat into firing position, a loop broken by obstacles. The breech handle, the elevation wheel, even the gunner's shoulder interrupted the flow. So he tried a reversal, a backhand arc that used recoil as leverage. The shell moved faster, pulled by inertia rather than strength. His crew laughed at first. It looked careless, even dangerous, but in the confined turret, it worked. 2 shells reached the chamber before the gunner finished adjusting sights. The commander timed it twice, then again. The stopwatch confirmed what disbelief denied. The rhythm had changed. No one filed a report. No order authorized it. In an army of systems, it slipped unnoticed through the cracks of routine. The loader did not seek approval. He simply continued, repeating the inverted swing until the turret itself seemed to move with him. He had done nothing mechanical, nothing written, nothing approved. Yet within that confined circle of steel, he had shifted the mathematics of survival. He turned the problem upside down, literally. The loader's discovery began with one observation: the breech never waited for the man always waited for the breech. Inside a Sherman's turret, that delay meant risk. Every recoil shook the floor, reset the body, and stole seconds no engine could replace. In training, the pause was doctrine. In combat, it was a flaw. The loader's working space measured little more than 1 meter across. The gun's breech swung in an arc wide enough to bruise knees and shins. Brass casings clanged off armor. Each 75mm shell weighed 6.8 kilograms, half a meter long, awkward to lift in a moving box of steel. To reload meant turning sideways, drawing back, and forcing the round forward against recoil. Manuals showed the motion clearly. Reach, seat, close, signal up. The pattern was uniform, tested, and slow. At Nancy in late 1944, a maintenance lull offered quiet minutes inside the tank. The young loader adjusted his grip. He rotated his wrist outward, palm facing down, and pulled the shell across his chest in a reverse swing. It felt unorthodox, but natural. The arc shortened, the elbow locked, and the momentum of the recoil carried the shell toward the open chamber instead of away from it. Tests began without authorization. Using a field stopwatch, the crew timed their cycles, 8.8 seconds plus or minus 0.4 by the manual, 4.9 seconds using the reverse motion. After 20 rounds, medics checking pulse and fatigue found heart rates lower than expected. Arm strain dropped by nearly 1/3. The turret temperature, recorded at the start and end, fell from 55 to 48 degrees Celsius. Fewer seconds meant less heat trapped between firings. The loader had changed geometry, not physics. By inverting the motion, he aligned the body's pivot with the gun's recoil path. The shoulder became the hinge, the elbow a guide. The loader no longer fought the tank. He moved with it. Each recoil created its own answer, a rhythm the manuals had never imagined. Witnesses described it as a blur. The shell seemed to glide into place before the breech closed. The loader's eyes never left the chamber. He followed the movement by feel, his hand tracing a familiar circle in the air. Observers wrote that it looked like throwing a hammer backward, force redirected through precision, not power. Ordnance officers, curious but skeptical, repeated the test in a stationary Sherman. They filmed it with a Bell & Howell 16mm camera at 15 frames per second. Frame analysis showed 40% less angular travel between pickup and seat. The loader's knees stayed fixed, his torso stable, no overreach, no wasted recovery. The shell's nose aligned perfectly on every cycle. From there, the method spread. Crews watched, copied, and passed it on. It carried no name at first, just a gesture repeated from one tank to another. Some marked the correct arc with chalk on turret walls. Others tied cloth around the loader's wrist to track movement in low light. It moved like rumor, unseen, unstoppable, faster than bureaucracy. Reports soon reached division workshops. One engineer noted, "Rate of fire increased with no structural change." That phrase appeared again in later memos. Nothing mechanical explained it. For the first time, the machine had improved through its operator, not its parts. In frontline tanks, the results became measurable. Companies practicing the motion logged sustained fire rates of 12 rounds per minute. Barrel overheating dropped as intervals shortened. Turret bearings wore evenly. Recoil stresses evened out across mounts. Aberdeen engineers later recognized the phenomenon as momentum alignment, a concept that would reappear decades later in mechanical loaders. By December, tank companies across Third Army adopted it quietly. It spread not by command, but by imitation. In rest camps, loaders practiced with inert shells, repeating the backhand swing until a muscle memory replaced thought. When battle returned, the turret's rhythm followed them. The breech opened, the arm moved, the shell slid home, not as procedure, but as instinct. No citation named the man who began it. Reports listed him as gunner's mate, Company B. His commander wrote no comment beyond the figures. Yet the effect reached beyond his name. Training officers observed that entire platoons reloaded faster without knowing why. The change had become cultural. Knowledge passed through motion, invisible and irreversible. Every number confirmed what the eye had seen. Field logs showed reload times cut by half, fatigue reduced, coordination improved. Crews that once felt underpowered against Panther or Tiger tanks now matched them through speed alone. The improvement gave the Sherman new life without altering a bolt or plate. The engineers reviewing those records understood its significance. They saw that human motion could modify machine performance at scale. They wrote, in careful technical language, "Operator-induced performance gain observed. No material deviation recorded." To them it was data. To the men in the field, it was survival. By the last days of December, word spread across the divisions. The loaders who used the method formed an unspoken network of example and proof. It was never briefed, never printed. It did not need to be. In that winter of mud and iron, efficiency traveled faster than command. By night, others copied the motion in silence. By January 1945, the front moved again. Towns collapsed under shell fire. Frozen roads became rivers of mud and steel. In that chaos, one silent change altered every battle: the loader's backhand motion. It spread without paperwork, passing from turret to turret like a shared instinct. Crews called it luck. Officers called it rumor. The results called it fact. Field reports from the 3rd Armored Division told the story first. At Wiltz, a platoon of Shermans fired 192 rounds in 15 minutes. Command believed that they had hidden extra tanks. They had not. Each crew reported reload cycles near 4.5 seconds. Inspectors noted heat damage on turret walls, but no mechanical failure. The speed had not broken the tanks. It had simply pushed them beyond what design had imagined. By late January, ordnance officers arrived to investigate what they labeled unauthorized loader technique. They brought gauges, timers, and caution. The results unsettled them. Average fire rate per vehicle doubled, from 6 to 12 rounds per minute. Engines, hydraulics, and guns remained within tolerance. The reports ended with the same dry phrase: technique observed, no mechanical irregularities. The Sherman's turret operated through hydraulic rotation, spinning at up to 2,500 revolutions per minute. Each recoil reached 450 pounds per square inch at the breech. The loader's backhand absorbed the pulse rather than resisting it. Motion turned from obstacle to partner. By using the recoil's return to propel his arm, the loader completed each cycle before vibration even ceased. The tank became a closed rhythm: recoil, reload, fire, recoil again. At the Rhine crossings, camera crews filmed Shermans firing an impossible cadence. Smoke blanketed the skyline before the sound caught up. The footage showed the loader's elbow barely extending, the movement small and precise. The shells seemed to flow from rack to chamber in one unbroken arc. Engineers reviewing the film wrote in the margin, "Cycle continuous. Operator sync with recoil." Morale shifted first. The Shermans, once ridiculed for their thin armor, now spoke faster than any gun on the field. Where a Panther's 88 once dominated the exchange, the American guns answered before the echo faded. For the first time, Allied tank crews fought without waiting. Timing erased fear. Reports from Cologne confirmed the advantage. Units with trained backhand loaders achieved 30% higher survival in street battles. Tanks that paused drew less return fire. In close alleys, the extra seconds defined who lived. Crews compared numbers during rest, chalking reload averages on turret sides. 5 seconds meant average, 4.6 meant pride. Maintenance crews marked those tanks with chalk rings under the turret, small circles that meant double tempo. They noticed something else. The faster rhythm reduced barrel stress. Heat cycles shortened, preventing uneven expansion. Instead of warping, metal cooled evenly between rounds. Engineers measured the data in field notes. Temperature drop from 600 to 480 degrees Fahrenheit across 3-shot intervals. The tanks endured the pace as if built for it. By February, the technique crossed borders. British liaison officers observed it among Canadian crews using the Firefly variant. The longer 17-pounder shell made the swing harder, yet still faster than the standard forward feed. Canadian instructors modified loader seats by carving a recess for elbow clearance. Reload time fell from 7 seconds to just above 5. The method no longer belonged to one army. It belonged to geometry. The front lines heard it before they saw it. German intercepts referred to rapid reload fire, bursts of consistent timing that suggested automatic loaders. Interrogated Panther crews described the sound as impossible precision. Their turrets could not mimic it. The breech, offset by design, forced loaders to rotate sideways. What the Sherman gained from central feed, the Panther lost to cramped asymmetry. No amount of skill could change physics. In one report from the 9th Armored Division, a tank commander wrote, "Gun firing sequence continuous. Loader never paused. Believed auto assist present." He did not yet know the truth. The assist was human. By mid-February, Ordnance Department engineers attempted to formalize the finding. They built a mock turret using standard measurements and measured angular motion. Results were exact: 40% less reach distance, 32% higher shell alignment accuracy, fatigue reduction measured at 28%. The final line of their summary read, "Efficiency achieved by operator geometry, not mechanism." No citation followed, no headline reached the press. But at the front, the change continued to multiply. Each battalion that adopted the motion became a little faster, a little harder to kill. At Remagen, as the bridge shook under artillery, Shermans fired with machine-like rhythm. 15 rounds left a single gun in under 90 seconds. The riverbank stayed under constant flame. Engineers credited the bridge's survival to structural luck. The tankers knew better. Luck had a rhythm, and they had found it. In barracks behind the line, loaders practiced the swing with empty shells. They stood in rows, arms rising and falling under dim lamps, repeating until their bodies remembered for them. The sound of brass striking breech echoed like a drum line. The loader's arc had become an anthem. Commanders began including reload cycles in inspection routines. Stopwatches measured seconds like target hits. 4.5 became the goal. Crews wrote numbers on scoreboards, turning survival into competition. The faster the rhythm, the prouder the crew. No orders demanded it. No manuals described it. But across frozen Europe, tankers trained to the sound of their own math: timing, recoil, cadence, repeat. The motion traveled faster than rumor, stronger than command. The pattern held. March 1945 opened under smoke and exhaustion. The Ruhr towns burned day and night, their streets echoing with engines that never cooled. In these narrow corridors of brick, the loader's backhand motion reached its full expression. It was no longer a trick or rumor. It had become reflex. Every Sherman that advanced carried the same rhythm: recoil, reverse, reload, fire, a cycle so clean that it blurred the line between man and machine. Combat logs from Cologne describe duels that lasted less than half a minute. One Sherman fired 3 rounds before a Panther completed its first correction. Breech exposure averaged 1.9 seconds, down from 3. The shorter open time kept fumes from flooding the turret, cutting smoke inhalation by half. Medics recorded fewer cases of loader cough. The air stayed harsh but survivable. Crews improvised details to preserve tempo. Some stitched leather straps along the ammo racks to guide the shell nose into the same arc. Others wrapped their forearms in cloth to absorb heat from spent brass. Mechanics expected cracked bearings and warped gun mounts, but none appeared. After-action inspections found even woe-wear, smoother bearing grooves, and reduced vibration. The guns were working closer to their limits, yet within them. The new rhythm forced change behind the line as well. Ammunition forecasts doubled. A single company that once required 300 shells for a morning now consumed 500. At Hennef, 3 platoons fired 820 rounds in 40 minutes without a single barrel failure. Shorter breech-open cycles lowered internal temperature from 600 to 480 degrees Fahrenheit. Time itself had become a coolant. Engineers at a forward testing site used cable gauges to track motion. They measured elbow travel at an average reduction of 41 degrees. Collision risk with elevation gear dropped to near zero. Misfeeds fell from 7 per 100 to just 2. One note read, "Breech to seat arc perfectly repeatable." The conclusion was mechanical, but its cause was human. British and Canadian observers carried the motion into Firefly units. The longer 17-pounder shell challenged precision, yet the backhand still reduced cycle time by more than 1 second. Average reload fell to 5.6 seconds with maintained accuracy. Some crews adjusted loader seats by carving small hollows for elbow clearance, the first physical redesign born from a gesture. The rhythm crossed armies and calibers alike. German reports registered the shock. Prisoner interrogations mentioned belt feeds or powered loaders inside Sherman turrets. None existed. Geometry, not machinery, had turned speed into weapon. Panther crews tried to copy the swing but found their side-mounted breech too offset to allow a clean path. The very layout that made their gun powerful made it slow. At Remagen, the myth of the automatic Sherman took root. As the bridge shook under bombardment, tanks on the west bank fired continuously to cover engineers. 15 rounds left each gun in under 90 seconds. Radio logs recorded it as sustained barrage by armor units. When silence followed, the bridge still stood. Official records called it structure. Crews called it timing. Fatigue appeared next. After weeks of constant engagement, loaders developed swollen joints and burned skin from shell friction. Medical sections recorded injury rates under 6% across 2 months, lower than expected for such tempo. Warm-up routines spread through camps, simple stretches performed before dawn to keep shoulders from locking. Even pain had become regulated, contained by habit. Tactical doctrine evolved to match the rhythm. Commanders now measured assault phases not by minutes, but by volleys. Prep fire compressed to seconds. Infantry coordination adjusted to the pulse of the Sherman's guns. In one engagement near Wesel, 6 tanks synchronized fire across a street grid, 3 shots each, then 5 seconds pause before shifting target. Witnesses described the pattern as a metronome that erased resistance 1 beat at a time. Aberdeen engineers visiting the front recorded a demonstration for archival study. The loader's motion was traced in chalk against the turret wall, filmed at 24 frames per second. Analysis yielded a mean reload time of 4.3 seconds, tolerance plus or minus 0.3. The report's title was plain: Field Loading Method Observed and Confirmed. Beneath it, no names appeared. As March turned to April, the motion no longer needed explanation. New recruits learned by sight, not instruction. A single demonstration replaced hours of lecture. "Watch the elbow. Keep it low," veterans said. After 10 rounds, the movement set into muscle memory, silent and exact. The method had become doctrine without decree. Behind the lines, depots adapted maintenance schedules to the new firing rates. Breech faces received finer polishing, fume extractors ran longer after engagements, and training officers revised ammunition flowcharts to match higher throughput. One sergeant wrote in a maintenance note, "No new parts, but time between them reduced by half." It was the clearest definition of progress the war could offer. By early April, the German front collapsed under sustained fire that seemed endless. Crews spoke of calm instead of panic. The rhythm replaced emotion. Every motion was already known, no hesitation, no surprise. Within the turret, the loader's world shrank to 5 seconds of certainty, repeated until silence returned. In the gray ruins of Hagen, a platoon fought a final street battle that lasted less than 5 minutes. Their logs recorded 43 shells fired, 21 confirmed hits, 0 mechanical faults. When the smoke cleared, the officer commanding simply wrote, "All tanks operational." He sent the page rearward. It joined dozens like it, unremarkable except for the speed written between the lines. By the end of the Ruhr campaign, the backhand motion had left no inventor, no ceremony, no medal. It survived only in repetition. Each loader who used it carried an unseen inheritance, a fraction of time cut from death. The war had measured victory in tons and miles. Yet here, its margin came from a single reversed arc of a human arm, the smallest movement that changed the velocity of steel. The avalanche had been built from beats. By late March 1945, the sound of war had changed. German listening posts no longer heard chaos, they heard rhythm. The American guns across the Rhine fired in unison, each volley spaced by seconds, each echo blending into the next. To German ears, it resembled an engine too large to fail. Crews called it the machine chorus. Analysts mistook it for an automatic loading system. It was not. It was muscle trained into precision. The loader's backhand motion had escaped its origin and become doctrine by imitation. From the 3rd Armored to the 9th, every Sherman crew that learned it doubled their rate of fire. Ammunition logs confirmed the scale. In 1 week of March, a single battalion expended 1,500 shells, equal to an entire campaign 2 years earlier. Logistics could barely keep pace. Fuel trucks carried crates of ammunition instead of rations. Convoy drivers joked that loaders were hungrier than tanks. At divisional headquarters, ordnance officers tried to explain the numbers. They found no altered parts, no new devices. Only one entry repeated across reports. Reverse feed technique, operator origin. The efficiency was measurable. Average reload dropped from 8 to 4 seconds. Output rose 92%. Fatigue curves stabilized after training. Nothing else in the war offered that kind of gain without redesign. German field commanders noticed the shift before their superiors did. A captured Panther crew near Kassel described American tanks firing before our sights settle. One officer wrote, "They shoot twice for our once." He believed they used an electric primer. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. Humans had matched the speed of their machines. As the Allies advanced through the Ruhr, the new rhythm turned local skirmishes into overwhelming waves. The Shermans no longer needed ambush or terrain, they needed time. Where a Panther took 7 seconds to reload, a backhand Sherman needed 4. In a 30-second duel, that gap became decisive. Commanders who once feared German gunnery now spoke of time dominance. The battlefield had shifted from armor to arithmetic. The myth of the automatic Sherman spread quickly. German intercepts described auto-fed American turrets. Tank manuals ordered countermeasures that never arrived. Crews stripped their own turrets, seeking faster angles, but the breech position betrayed them. The Panther's side feed blocked reversal. The Tiger's recoil weight left no space for arc. Geometry had chosen sides. At the front, reality turned mechanical records into rhythm. Crews no longer thought in rounds per minute, but in seconds between motion. Some counted aloud, 1, 2, seat, fire. Others moved without speech, guided only by recoil. Between firings, silence lasted the length of a heartbeat. The war's noise had found order. The strain came quietly. The loader's arms swelled from repetition. Wrists bruised from shell bases, shoulders burned from heat and friction. Yet the crews refused relief. To stop was to break the rhythm, and rhythm meant survival. Medics reported fatigue, but few replacements. Pain became another gauge of readiness. At Aberdeen, engineers watching combat footage documented the data. The Sherman's reverse swing reduced total effort per cycle by 19% and kept chamber pressure consistent through sustained barrages. Heat spread evenly. Barrel stress fell. The machine benefited from the man. The curve of human motion had perfected the curve of recoil. In field hospitals, doctors found men whose muscles no longer relaxed. Hands twitched during rest, elbows pulsed with phantom cycles. The body had learned to measure life in seconds. One medic wrote, "They sleep in cadence." Even off the line, the motion persisted, the habit of survival refusing to stop. At Kassel, a single Sherman fought 3 Panthers from a shattered intersection. Smoke covered the field. The loader's hands moved through heat and noise, blind but precise. 21 rounds left the gun in 120 seconds. The Panthers burned in sequence. The commander believed they faced an experimental weapon. None survived to learn otherwise. The rhythm reached its breaking point in April. The front advanced faster than supply. Ammunition depots emptied daily. Truck columns ran continuous loops to keep up with crews firing twice as fast as planned. Commanders calculated that each tank now consumed 75 rounds per hour of combat. The figures defied logistics. Yet every officer agreed. To slow down was to lose the edge. At headquarters, analysts debated whether to formalize the method. Some argued it was too specialized, others feared injury risks. But by then, no order could stop it. The backhand swing had passed beyond command into reflex. It lived in the hands of men who had no time to read orders. German units near Hanover tried to imitate what they observed. They trained loaders to spin shells backward through the breech arc. After a week, they abandoned it. Their recoil geometry worked against the human body. They had built weapons that exceeded men. The Americans, through accident or instinct, had built a weapon that adapted to them. In the war's final weeks, fatigue overtook clarity. Crews functioned on momentum. Between engagements, they still practiced. Empty casings, no gunfire, only rhythm. The loader's voice became the metronome of survival. The commander's orders shortened into numbers. 5, ready. 4, fired. 3 left. The language of men reduced to arithmetic. When ceasefire came, silence felt unnatural. Loaders sat inside their tanks, hands still twitching, measuring the absence of recoil. The human body had adapted too perfectly. In field hospitals, dozens showed involuntary firing motion during sleep. The habit had outlasted the war. History remembered tonnage and armor thickness, but rarely speed. Official records listed improved loader efficiency, nothing more. Yet buried within the statistics lay the truth that one reversed motion had turned the Sherman from an underdog into a metronome of war. At Fort Knox, training manuals began listing reverse feed as standard practice by April 1945. The phrase carried no footnote, no name. It appeared between torque values and hydraulic ratios, as though it had always existed. The loader who began it vanished into anonymity. That anonymity became the point. The innovation was not invention, but instinct, a gesture born from need, multiplied by thousands and forgotten by all. When engineers at Aberdeen later tested the technique again, they found it still worked. Their report ended with the same sentence found in the field memos months earlier. Operator efficiency achieved, no mechanical irregularity observed. It was the cleanest verdict war could give. By the time the tank stopped, the rhythm had entered memory. Men left the field with arms that remembered motion longer than reason. Factories studying post-war data used the same angles to design automatic feeders. Machines learned what men had proven possible. The numbers had already decided. When the guns fell silent in May 1945, rows of Shermans stood idle on German roads. Their barrels were blackened, their turrets streaked with soot, but their crews were alive. Most left without ceremony, packing gear into duffel bags still smelling of oil and cordite. Inside those tanks, one change had survived every battle, a reversed movement that no one had ordered and no one could unlearn. At Aberdeen Proving Ground in 1946, engineers began cataloging wartime field improvisations. Among hundreds of entries on lubricants, sprockets, and fuel mixtures sat a brief 3-line note. Backhand loader method, verified effective, no mechanical alteration. The words carried no author. Testing officers rebuilt a Sherman turret, fixed chalk guides to its walls, and filmed the motion. The stopwatch confirmed it. Average reload 3.6 seconds, margin plus or minus 0.3. The loader could sustain the pace indefinitely, even as pulse and temperature stabilized. Designers working on the M26. Pershing traced the motion onto their blueprints. They noticed how the reversed swing aligned with the feed arc of a mechanical loader. The geometry drawn by a soldier's arm had already predicted automation. When ordnance engineers modeled early autoloader concepts in 1948, they followed that same arc. Human efficiency had defined the curve before machines formalized it. Military physiologists took note too. Shoulder strain dropped 18%, elbow stress decreased by nearly 1/5. Reports described it as ergonomic efficiency discovered through combat conditions. For the first time, muscle dynamics entered the vocabulary of weapons design. Engineers began adding clearance zones around loader stations, marking them with white paint to match the arc of the backhand swing. The motion had become part of design law. At Fort Knox in 1949, a training film titled Efficient Loader Posture demonstrated the movement with a clean, silent precision. A soldier lifted a drill shell, pivoted his elbow low, and slid it into the breech. The narrator avoided any explanation. The caption read only, approved method for confined turret operations. The war's improvisation had become official instruction, stripped of history. By the early 1950s, every American tank crew practiced it as routine. Manuals listed reverse feed loading without context. No one asked who had created it, no one thought to. The loader's motion had entered permanence, an anonymous reflex carried across generations. Historians later traced fragments, a field report noting inverted loader method, a technician's log describing increased cadence. None included a name. It no longer mattered. The act had belonged to every hand that survived 1945. Beyond the Army, engineers studying post-war industry borrowed the same principle. Factory designers adjusted conveyor heights, aircraft loaders refined their swing angles, and assembly lines adopted mirrored motions to reduce fatigue. Efficiency, born from battle, found its way into peaceful machines. By 1955, tank reload drills worldwide averaged 4 seconds, the number accepted as natural. No mention of the loader at Bastogne appeared in manuals or museums. Yet every motion repeated his discovery, perfected through imitation. His idea no longer needed credit. It existed as fact, quiet, inevitable, written into the muscle of war. War had turned muscle into method. In the spring of 1945, when the last engines cooled and the smoke thinned across the Rhine, a lone Sherman sat beside a ruined bridge. Its barrel still breathed faint steam into the morning haze. Inside the open turret, empty brass casings lay in neat rows, each marked by the same faint smear, proof of repetition beyond thought. No reporter wrote the loader's name. No commander mentioned his gesture in dispatches. Yet every tank that rolled after him carried it unseen, a fragment of movement embedded in steel. What began as one man's reversal had become the rhythm of an army. It needed no signature, no ceremony, only memory held by muscle. Years later, a training reel would replay his motion under fluorescent light. Another soldier, younger and unaware, repeated the same arc as the camera turned. The caption called it standard procedure. It was more than that. It was instinct engineered through survival. When the projection faded, the screen went white. On it lingered nothing but the outline of motion, the trace of a man who turned recoil into time and silence into proof. The loader's reverse motion had outpaced steel itself.